Hello students, good morning. I hope you have listened to the second lecture also, wherein we have discussed the beginnings of the literary criticism. In fact, I have mentioned four important literary critics of the ancient period. Of course, not very much known as literary critics, but philosophers, orators, writers, poets, etc., who went into the field of literary criticism also, with the focus on how to write and what to write and what are the guidelines for good writing, etc. So, among the six people I have mentioned, like Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Horace, Quintilian, and Longinus, I have given you the brief introduction of what you call uh, the last four instead of the first two, who are the beginners. Who are the beginners in the field of literary criticism. So now in today's class, let us see the very beginnings of literary criticism in the works of well-known philosopher Plato, whom we all know as a great philosopher from Greece. And let us see what he said about literary criticism, or what is his argument that he presented regarding poets and poetry, etc. So let me share my screen now. So I hope the screen is visible to you. Um, so let us see who is Plato first. See there the Athenian philosopher Plato, and his birth took place in 428, and he lived up to 347 in the BC. So this itself shows that these are the very much beginners of the literary criticism. And Plato is known as one of the most important figures in the ancient Greek and in the history of Western thought. Entire Western thought is based upon the preachings or writings or guidelines that were given by Plato as a philosopher. It is the what we call fundamental thing, that philosophy is the basis, or the mother branch for all branches of knowledge, from which other branches of knowledge have originated and divided and developed. So the philosopher Plato is very is also known as father of many branches of epistemology or knowledge. And actually, he wrote many works, some of which are may not be available for today, because it was written in a very ancient period. Yet, some of his works are very noteworthy even now, and most of the political science, the pillars of political science, and other the fundamentals of many humanities, social sciences, or sciences are found in his writings. So, in his written dialogues, he conveyed and expanded on the ideas and techniques of his teacher Socrates. Of course, Socrates is the before Plato is the philosopher, and he is the master of Plato. And Plato, of course, is well known for his disciple, who is Aristotle. Plato established an institution for imparting education to the students, and this is known as the academy. And Aristotle, who of course has become the greatest philosopher after his master Plato, is trained in this academy. And of course, we will be reading how Aristotle's teachings, or how Aristotle's ideas were very influential in shaping the literary criticism, or in the evolution of literary criticism. The whole history of literary criticism, in fact, revolves around many of the concepts that are supplied by Aristotle. In fact, some of the concepts were developed by Plato also, but we will see how why uh, Plato is not much celebrated or much taught in the field of literary criticism, because he was having some kind of adverse views regarding poets and poetry, and which were of course challenged by his disciple Aristotle. We'll be reading in Poetics how he challenged his master, and he tried to establish that what his master has stated or established or felt was to some extent not agreeable, and he proceeded to give more significant place to literature or poets or poetry or different forms of arts as such. So Plato is very well known in the field of philosophy or in epistemology for his Republic. The one that is the Republic is his work. And if you go to the sociological, political, and economic conditions during the times of Socrates and Plato, there were many general inquiries about the matters of state and its citizens, because this is a very ancient period, and we can take it as the beginnings of the state or formation of the state. People started forming into groups, and then they started forming states, and they started giving citizenship, etc. And they felt that there is some need to write down some rules, so to rule the state and guide the citizens in a right way. So they have many political questions, economical questions, or social questions, etc. And most of them were based upon the utilitarian purposes. This is what is the use of having different arts or different crafts in a society, and how a king or the ruler should be, and what are the responsibilities of the ruler as well as the ruled, the people. So this is political thought, but among these questions of politics or economics or sociology, etc., the value of literature in a society is also very much questioned or interrogated in those days of the very beginnings of the establishment of the state. And what is the nature of literature, and what are the functions of literature, etc., of course, was one among the many inquiries that were made in the philosophical and intellectual worlds of Socrates and Plato in the very beginning. So Plato, being the disciple of Socrates, developed his views on literature in the Republic. Of course, he based his views on some of the views of his master, that is Socrates also. So what are Plato's ideas on literature? Let us see. And basically, his ideas of literature are based on his theory of forms. And this theory of forms actually was explained by Plato in Phaedo, one of his writings, and the Republic even. So what is this theory? Let us see here on this slide. If you look at the slide, see here, according to this theory, the familiar world of objects which surrounds us and which we apprehend by our senses is not independent and self-sufficient. So his view, this definition or this viewpoint that is given by Plato regarding the theory of forms, of course, throws light on our understanding of this universe. And he felt that the familiar world of objects, this world or the world around us is filled with many objects. Like, you say, if you take nature, there are so many called, hills or rivers or oceans or nature, trees, everything, many objects are there. and which of course we apprehend or we understand by our senses. We can see, we can't see the air. Of course it can also be taken as an object, but we can just perceive it with the sense, with our sense. And of course lightning or darkness, etc., and all the objects, whether man-made or nature, god given, etc., we can see, and we can hear, we can touch, we can feel. And that is why he says that this world of objects that is surrounding us, of course, which we understand through our senses only, according to Plato. See, this is very much necessary. Keep in view, instead of posing questions, how the nature cannot be independent or self-sufficient, etc., let us not. This is with the very beginning of the knowledge that Plato has arrived at this point, and these are the views of Plato that we are discussing. And according to him, or according to his theory of forms, this universe, or the familiar world of objects which we are living in, is not independent and self-sufficient. So what is it? How is it? Let us see what Plato further says. Indeed, it is not the real world. So Plato, of course, philosophically, thinks that whatever the world that we are looking at or perceiving with our senses is not the real world, even though the objects in it exist. Of course, here we'll get a contradiction. How is it not reality? Because we are able to see them, we are able to touch them, and sometimes we are able to feel them. How is it is not reality? But Plato, of course, may be thinking of a realm that is higher than the physical or the physically visible world, perhaps. So he says that this world in which we are existing, we are living, and in which there are many objects, he says that is dependent upon another world. Another world is the realm of pure forms or ideas. So there is another world to the world that we are able to see, touch, feel, okay, and sense. So here he is discriminating between the two worlds. One is the world of pure forms or ideas, and the other is the real world. So we have two layers now. One is the world of ideas, and the other is the real world. And here he says that this forms or ideas, this world of forms or ideas, which can be apprehended only by reason and not by our bodily senses or perceptions. So this is a higher world that Plato is speaking very philosophically, and he thinks that this cannot be understood by us, by our bodily senses or perceptions or understanding, but we need a higher rationality or higher reason to understand this world. What is this world? So here, students, you can, all of you can guess or keep in mind one thing, that he is making a differentiation between the two worlds here. One is the real world that we are existing in, or this is the world of objects where we live in, and the other world is the world of forms, which are very pure or ideas, and which according to Plato is not understandable for us. So we have the mention of two worlds here. Now let us see, these are the two realms or two worlds. Now how to connect these two worlds? What is the connection between these two? And according to Plato, it says that qualities of any object in the physical world are derived from the ideal forms of those qualities. For example, here Plato says an object in the physical world is beautiful because it partakes of the ideal form of beauty which exists in the higher realm. So here he is trying to connect the two worlds here, and he says this world of objects is built upon the world of forms, or ideas, which are very pure and which are very beautiful and which are very high and perhaps noble, etc. And this world that is formed upon the world of forms or ideas is not greater than that world, that is the world of forms. So here Plato says that if you take an object in the physical world, it is not beautiful because it partakes of the ideal form of beauty. Of course, it is not beautiful in the sense it is beautiful to some extent. It is beautiful only because it is a part of the ideal form of beauty which exists in the higher realm. So here Plato is actually trying to present that this whole world, the physical world, is based upon another world. Here we can think that as we always think of two realms like the earth or the heaven, etc. Where heaven we presume or we think or we read in the religious texts, the higher world where God lives, etc. Where of course perfection rules and where there is no what you call hunger, where there is no thirst and where there is no cheating, where there is no darkness, etc. What all negative ideas that we have, we always attach with the heaven. But it is very true that in spite of our belief in God or whatever religion it is, we always we may sometimes contemplate whether the world of heaven exists or not, whether God exists or not, if at all, if it is existing, what kind of world it is, etc. So the invisible world, which is built through our higher rationality or imagination, whatever we call, is always perfect, or this is called as the perhaps Plato refers to this world that is forms, the ideal world of forms or ideas. And so he thinks that though because this world is made looking at that world of forms or ideas, it is beautiful to some extent only, but not like a perfect beauty or perfect qualities, etc., as we found, as we can see in the world of pure forms or ideas. And so he takes the example of the qualities like tallness, equality, or goodness, etc. And Plato sees as the highest forms of these are the highest of the forms, and he even characterizes entire objects as having their essence in the ideal forms. Hence, a bed in the physical world is an imperfect copy of the ideal bed in the world of forms. So here he tries to differentiate between the higher world of forms and of course the lower world of reality or objects which we live in. And so he thinks that the objects or whatever that we see in this world are qualities, etc., that we see in this world, of course, are not like the what you say, the world of forms, but they are altered or they are changed. Here, the connection, of course, we can take one illustration from geometry also, wherein, of course, it is stated that any triangle or square that we construct using physical instruments is bound to be imperfect. A perfect measurement is not at all possible. If you are familiar with mathematics, geometry, of course, as children or high school, in your high school, you might have gone through. And though we draw circles or rectangles or squares or triangles using what you call the instruments that we used to have in our geometry boxes, if you remember very much, we of course used to draw. But when it is human made or when it is drawn by us, it never equals with the perfect triangle or square that is there in the world of forms, and it is always imperfect. Though it appears to be very perfect, it is not perfect. So according to this example, we can very much understand what Plato is stating, and what he is trying to bring in to our mind. So at most he says that whatever we made is not equal to the form that is prevailing, that is the higher realm, or the world of pure forms and ideas. And and according to Plato, at most it can merely approximate the ideal triangle, which is perfect. So we can just go to very near to this concept or the idea, but not we can produce the replica of that concept or idea. So hence, according to Plato, the world of forms, of course, being changeless, eternal, alone constitutes reality. So he thinks that the world of forms is permanent, it is eternal, and it will never be changing. And here he is presenting a contradiction to the world of objects or the world of reality in which we are existing. And he says, in contrast to the changeless, eternal, and reality, we have a world that continuously changes, and we wherein we have there is decay, and we just merely exist, and it is not the essence. And of course there is what you call, there is no uniformity, but we found in it multiplicity and particularity. So basing upon this theory of forms, of course Plato has developed his view of art. Then as you all know that literature is also an art. Literature is also an art form, like painting or sculpture and others. Plato considers that it is once removed from reality. Art actually is reproducing things that are nothing but objects in the world surrounding us. So the world in which we are living is not the real world according to Plato. This world itself is based upon the world of forms, the higher realm. So that means we are removed from the reality for once. And when this world is being copied, that is through literature or painting or sculpture, of course this world is again the world of art is again removed from the reality. So according to Plato, actually, he says that here he says they are copies only. The art is like it is twice removed from the reality, because the world in which we live, that is the world of objects, is removed once from the reality that is of the higher realm according to Plato. And when art is copying this world of objects, again it is removed. That means it is twice removed from the reality. So that is how Plato views at art, and of course for him literature also. And then basing upon this concept, actually, he thinks that unless an art is having a utility purpose, it is of no use in the society. And of course he says that art may take away people from reality rather than towards it, because the art as such is copying the world of objects, which is away from reality, once away from the reality. And when the poet is copying from the world of object, it is one more time removed from the reality. So hence, according to Plato, the poet as a man and poetry as a form of statement, both seemed untrustworthy. So, basing upon this theory of forms, Plato considers that poets and poetry are not based on reality, and they are not trustworthy. And because they are depicting the physical world as an imperfect copy, or transcendent ideas, and poetry as a mere copy of the copy. So poetry for Plato is nothing but a mere copy of the copy. And so he, of course, says that literature could only mislead the seeker of the truth. If we are trying to arrive at the truth of this world, Plato thinks that literature can't help us. And Plato credited the poet with the divine inspiration. But, how come that the poet is able to write or produce art? Of course, nowadays we may not be agreeing this, but because we have creative writing schools or art schools, etc., wherein you are trained to paint or to make sculpture or any other art form is being trained now. Now we have even poetry, which is considered to be the divine gift, etc. Or poets, according to Plato, also are having divine inspiration. But now we can see the creative art schools, creative writing schools, etc. Now writing poetry is being taught, or writing dramas is being taught. So today's scenario is different, but when Plato is telling that he credited the poet with divine inspiration, but this he took in a negative way, where he considered that the poets are possessed by madness. And that is why he says that this such kind of madness which is there in poet would subvert the interests of a rational polity. So here, polity are people, nothing but people. Plato, based upon this theory of forms, develops the idea that poets and poetry should not be there in the Republic, and there he advocated to the banished, to be banished, the poets to be banished from the hypothetical Republic, in the real whatever the republic he envisaged or he imagined to be the ideal state, or the utopian state, etc., which is based upon very much on the utilitarian philosophy. Plato tried to keep the poets away from the society, because the utility of poetry, of course, is not visible instantly. So these are the ideas of Plato. You please try to read more regarding Plato as a philosopher and his other works, and his master Socrates also, and his ideas, other ideas that he envisaged in Republic, etc. And I advise you to write an assignment on Plato's Republic, not only his ideas on literature, but what are the major ideas that Plato has presented in the Republic. So in the next class, I will be dealing with Plato's disciple, that is Aristotle, and from there we will go into the lesson that is prescribed for you, that is Aristotle's Poetics. Before, this is the ancient history of literary criticism that we are seeing now, and into the modern, what happened in the middle period, Middle Ages, and then modern ages, etc. We'll be seeing as we proceed through the units and the prescribed syllabus. This is all the Western philosophy or Western literary criticism. Here I request you to remember one point, because this Western thought, the literary criticism is based upon philosophy rather than aestheticism or whatever it is we will see in the Eastern aesthetics. Now this is the part of Western aesthetics that we are dealing. So you keep in mind what is Western aesthetics and what is the difference between Eastern aesthetics, and we have the second unit prescribed for you as Indian aesthetics. So there, when we come into that unit, I'll be I'll be giving you more inputs regarding these points of view. But for the time being, you keep in mind what is Plato's idea. Because understanding Plato's idea of poetry or poets and what place he gave to the poets in his society, that is republic, is more important to understand Aristotle and his poetics. So with this, I conclude. We'll be meeting again in the fourth lecture. I'll be uploading shortly. Now, for today's class, I'm concluding, and I hope you will write the assignment and mail to the department mail ID, which was communicated to you through WhatsApp groups. Have a nice time, all of you.